start the video.
All right, look at that. You got a nice close up of.
Oh, I don't make. Wow.
All right,
Gotta wax my mustache.
give it a little twirl on the edges. Yeah. All right. I will call to order this meeting of the Wabash Township Board on January 16th. It is 7:13 p.m. Mr. Secretary, would you like to do the roll call?
President Ian Pillars.
Present.
Trustee Ann Hill is here, David Tate is here, and Chief Ed Ward is here. And we will have at the caucus the names of upcoming members that would like to seek the position of secretary on the board.
Indeed. All right. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it's only been a few weeks, but we've got township updates here. If you want to say anything, well, we've got that resolution. Oh, I lost that from the agenda for some reason, but yes, let's vote on the approval of minutes from January 2nd.
Are there any amendments or changes to the minutes as submitted? I hear none. Minutes have been approved and submitted to you, Mr. President.
Yep, I
All in
approve.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Which one of you would like to go first? If you have anything substantial to update from the last 2
I don't have
weeks.
anything substantial in the last 2 weeks, so you can go ahead.
I just got a quick report to run through that.
Sure.
So I've been working on trying to get updated or get a 2023 annual report finished up, and I thought I had it done today until I screwed up and saved it and closed it without part of it there. So I'm going to go through what I've got, the meat of it, and then I'll just get you guys a copy of the updated when it's finished. Because I think some of it, I would rather just burn through it now, so you all are able to see the important parts. So that. No. So there's quite a few things that I kind of tried to include in here, and you guys will, again, I'll send you the full version of it and you guys will be able to see it. There's a couple parts and I'm going to be reading off my piece of paper and not off of here, but the most important part for me burning through this annual report is again, it's got our org chart that shows our shift layouts, who we've got where, and some of it'll make more sense as we go, but we've had kind of a crazy year, a busier year. So for 2023 actual incidents, we had 1,275 incidents. You guys can kind of see the breakdown up there. You can kind of see our busiest days. You know, I think if you break that down, it averages about 3.5 calls a day, but it's rare for us to have a day that we're running 3 calls. We're generally running 5 to 6 calls a day. These were our busiest days that we had through the year. So along with those run numbers and the way these are kind of calculated out here, the way they're the other calls are calls for assistance for things, you know, have an animal stuck someplace that we were going to send somebody out to try to help out however we can. Generally, those other calls are not emergency calls for service. They're other items that we go out to help somebody with for fill in the blank, whatever those things would be. So we've got miscellaneous activities. Those would be when we go out to do fire inspections, when we go help Jim do that, and we'll take a shift out to go do those things. Those sorts of things when we're doing fire prevention details at the schools, when we've got people here that we're showing around the firehouse, all those things get logged in the system as activities, not necessarily incidents, but so that's way up. Last year we had logged 24 And some of it's just our record keeping. We're getting better at keeping records. It's not that we've done, 40 more than we did last year, but we have done quite a bit more, but really we're trying to work our way through better documentation of the things that we're doing. And the bad part is I can't generate some of the great reports out of our software today from our old software. It just kind of sucks, and it doesn't give us good output. We can get raw data, but it's up to us to kind of compile all that data and put it in a better format. So the training events, I think, was a big deal. 243 training events were logged in 2023. And that they were on average 2.5 hours a piece, just again, on average for the whole thing. And that put us over 600 hours worth of training, which to me is huge in a department our size. 600 hours of training is huge. I think it goes a lot to not just the people that we have. That training does not take into account our 3 firefighters that we sent to the academy that were there for 16 weeks. I could have included that in, but I felt like kind of skewed the number a little bit. But 3 of our firefighters were there for 16 weeks. So that's on top of that. So to me, that's a very, very big number. We do a whole lot of training. And I think that it kind of bodes well for us when it comes to our turnover rate with our volunteers and even paid staff. So that's something that for me, if I was looking at another place to be, those training hours are hugely important. Even if it be as a volunteer looking for a place, that shows to me that the department is willing to engage with their staff and train them on a lot of stuff for 607 hours worth of training time. So I thought that was pretty awesome myself. So the part that I'm not reading off there is the kind of the letter from the chief part that's in there. We've done a lot. I mean, 2023 was a crazy busy year for us in a lot of aspects. It was we grew our paid staff from 5 to 12, which is awesome. In and of itself, that's awesome, that growth. But you've got to be able to train those folks. Of those 12 firefighters that we had, or I take that back, of the 7 firefighters that we had hired, 5 of them were pulled from our existing roster of volunteers, which to me, it goes, I think that strengthens that argument that the time that we put into our volunteers is beneficial to us all the way around. And like we've all talked about, being able to pull from our own people I think it makes this process a whole lot easier and a whole lot better. Being able to pull from our own people, those people that we've trained, those people that know the way we do business, even if it's not, if we hire some of those folks full time. I mean, of those 5 that we hired that came from our volunteer roster, 3 of them went to the academy, and that was just because the academy started around the time that those 3 guys were hired. And the academy, the Greater Lafayette Career Firefighter Academy, puts everybody through firefighter 1 and 2, EMT, and hazmat, which is awesome. And of the guys that went to the academy, of the 3, 2 of them were already EMTs. 1 of them was already firefighter, EMT, hazmat tech, all those things, but still went through the process. And I think that even if you had been a firefighter and an EMT prior, there was still tremendous value gained from being in the academy. So that was, I think that was it was a very, very good thing, not just for those guys to be involved in that program, but it was important for our department to be involved in that and to be asked to participate in that. I think that keeps the door open to a lot more training opportunities for our folks that gives them a better hands-on sort of experience working with firefighters from Purdue and West Lafayette and Lafayette. And it just continues to grow. So earlier in the year, we chose to kind of change our process and how we were tracking, involvement and engagement with our volunteer staff. And that was when we decided to take all of our volunteers, all of our rostered staff, and place them all on the shifts where we already had our career firefighter staff. It allows more training opportunities for them. They know what 10 days a month-ish their shift will be here and what days we're expecting more of a response out of them on those days. Gives them time off through that process, but also swings the door open for if all 3 shifts are training on different things, A volunteer's got the ability to be here all of those days and train with all of the shifts differently if they want. And I think it's not just about the training, it's also about our ability to track folks and know where they're at and what their involvement is. As busy as we are, it's really hard to track volunteer staff. Because people as volunteers give the time that they have available, which is fantastic. But knowing who's engaged in training with their shifts, training with the rest of the department, who's taking calls. If you're not taking calls, I hope to be able to see you doing trainings and things like that. But it also gives us kind of a way to know who we're dumping a lot of time and effort in, and who those folks are that are investing back into the department, taking calls and doing things. So it's been helpful for us to be able to have in this, as we created this, in October, we promoted Andrew Spiker and Travis Merkel to be able to have a duty officer on each shift, a career duty officer. And our goal is to have a volunteer officer on each shift as well. We feel that in doing that, it gives the volleys somebody to answer to that understands their perspective. I mean, Drew on his shift here is the shift captain. Now Drew is overall responsible for that shift, but I think that provides somebody on Drew's shift, which he doesn't have a volley officer right now. When he does, the two of them will be able to kind of have that conversation before escalating an issue. The two of them will be able to talk about it and work their way through that situation. So, but we're making good progress, doing a lot of things, and some of it's a little difficult at times to try to get done and try to get folks to understand the purpose and process behind it. But also through that process, we've been able to add 4 part-time firefighters. So of those folks that we hired, 2 of them were our part-time folks. Andrew Spiker was part-time and Chris Champ was part-time for us. So that took away those part-timers. So we've opened that door up. We now have 4 part-time firefighters that come from our existing roster. Trevor Doyle, who's a captain on B shift. Trevor's part-time. Devin Shute, who is an engineer on C shift, and Jake Elliott and Jennifer Pooplin. All 4 of them are part-time for us right now, and they've kind of got their own training plan they're working through, because our goal is to have them trade for trade, a person for person. So if somebody takes off, we can plug one of them into that hole, and there won't be any difference in how we're doing business. So it's a process, of course, trying to work our way through it, but I think we're getting there. We were doing okay. And right at Christmas time, COVID decided to wreak havoc through the department a little bit and took out almost an entire shift of guys. So that made us kind of scramble around to figure out what that trade is for part-time folks. And it's unfortunate, but it helps us to see where our discrepancies were in what that part-time position looked like. So, so we're getting there, but there's a lot more coming as well down the pipe. We're always trying to figure out if the way we're doing business is right, trying to figure, and it may be right today and it may not be right in 3 or 4 months. There may be things that change. And I think that we've got the right folks in place right now to be able to help navigate when we're seeing those issues and us be able to stay ahead of them. So right now, Dalton Stewart, Dalton resigned, and you guys saw that Ethan Fleming was a firefighter for us. He also resigned. So both of them just had other things that they were wanting to chase. So, which is fine, but that opened those 2 positions up for us. And it's actually going to be a benefit for us in the back end. The 2 positions that I'm hiring to refill them are going to be lateral firefighter paramedic positions from another department. So that gives us the opportunity to not have to invest as much time through EMS training. Well, hopefully we'll be able to get 2 medics out of the process that we won't. So when we start our ALS non-transport, we'll have at least 1 medic per shift. And I think that'll help spread it out a little bit better. That'll help us with time coverage for that. And hopefully we're able to get a couple folks that's got some good time and experience in another department. I've heard several folks that are interested. I know Drew has as well from surrounding departments. So we believe it'll be a good thing for us on the back end. And truthfully, I want our folks to be where they're happy. So, Dalton was one of the folks that we brought in and put through the academy. Got a lot out of the process. Ethan was, hired very early too, and just life pulled them in a different direction. So, and I think we're going to have that. The more people we have, the more that's going to be a thing. So, being prepared for it as much as we can is a benefit, which is why initially, when we were full staff, we had hired that floater position, which was Marco, and Marco got hired. The goal was if we lose somebody, Marco's got the ability to float to that shift and fill that third position. So there will be 3 guys per shift. And unfortunately, dropping 2 at the same time, it didn't add any benefit for him to float. So, but we're getting there. We've got several volunteers that we're ready to bring in. We've got an EMT class going on right now. That's got 6 of our folks in it, which is a huge benefit. There's a fire 1 and 2 class getting ready to open up that's going to be starting, and we've got a list of people that are interested in joining the department. We've waited to bring that group of folks on just because we want to make sure we've got the ability to train them, not just bring them in, give them stuff and say, well, we'll get to you when we get to you. We just don't want to do that to folks yet. So, but we're getting there. Everything seemed to be on the uphill swing. So, uphill swing, I don't know if that's a thing, but you know what I'm saying. So again, the positions that we created, the promotion positions, the lieutenant positions, as those guys got promoted through the process, because we're starved for, we are a department that is very, very young. You guys have heard me say it before, and we're kind of starved for that senior man sort of leadership in the department. So, you know, for what we decided to do for those promotions were to take our 2 most senior guys that we had that were career firefighters, our 2 most senior career firefighters we had, and move them into those positions. So far, I think it's worked out well, but that's because there was a lack of a huge process putting them through. It's been kind of a probationary sort of thing. You know, we're giving them those positions and allowing them to kind of work within them and trying to teach, train, and mentor them through the process. But what is that? Oh, the beep.
Sorry.
I thought it was out there. You're okay. Oh, that's fine. I'm about to get those too, by the way. I'm excited about it. Not so much. So that's been a benefit for us, making that a probationary sort of process. So they know that they're working through growing into those positions, and we're given those positions to just, you know, to have the holes filled. I'd rather the holes not be filled than to just give them to people. But I feel like they're both in a position to do a very, very good job for us and to help through the process. So, again, once the rest of this gets hammered out, I'll get it to you guys so you've got these numbers. But it's been it seems to be more often than not. You guys have probably heard us talk about it before, but we are kind of weird in our department in how we get hit for calls. It's rare for us to get hit for a single call. We're normally taking a call, on a call, and we get hit for another call pretty quickly. The volunteers have really helped with that quite a bit, that second call. And also we're trying to kind of change the way, we're doing business where we've got a ship that's got 3 guys on the ship. So Drew ship, for instance, you've got Jake and Evan and himself. On a run-of-the-mill medical call, generally these 2 guys will go take that call. Drew will stay back. Especially during the day when Joe or I are here, because then that's a second person that we can put on a truck and go take another call. Now, of course, they don't have that advantage here because it's just Travis and Blake. But we're trying to do that a little bit more, and we seem to be getting hit for calls a lot more regularly now, back to back. So again, to me, that's some of that place where the volunteer staff is hugely beneficial. So, and they listen, they pay attention to it. And we're, so on top of all that stuff, this year, we're going to be incredibly busy with more inspections that we're doing. As all those building permits that we've talked about for a couple of years are starting to come to fruition and they're starting to build those properties, we're gonna have a lot more inspections that we're having to do on properties. A lot of projects that are coming to completion, you know, as they're finishing up the school and things like that. So, we are actively in the process of finding a couple other part-time inspectors that we can have come in right now. Jim's doing it all on his own. And it's just a matter of finding the right people to do that. They've got to understand the dynamic of the job we do here is different than being an inspector in the city of West Lafayette sort of thing. And a lot of it is because we don't have ordinance to back up a lot of the things that we would want people to do. So what I don't want to do is put our cart before our horse and send somebody out to try to enforce things that we don't necessarily have the ability in court to force because we don't have ordinance or resolution for it. But a lot of that process is hopefully being fixed in this legislative session. They're trying to go back and make it to where we can start putting those things in place again. It got stopped last year. What's that?
There was a preemption, so, well, it wasn't preempted necessarily, but any ordinance had to go through a group of 15 people, 10 of which were builders. So it wasn't gonna go.
Yeah. So they're trying to fix some of that this session and how that's all written and things like that. So hopefully through that process, we'll be able to get kind of, again, we go out and we tell folks, hey, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. Our ability to force that change sometimes is very, very limited. Our ability to do some things like stop work if there's a lot of issues, we can do it. We can tell them, and I think I, as the chief, have the authority to do that. But it's one of those things that we have to do our best to play well with the builders in the area too. So we're getting there. It's a process, and I would say that's just something that this year, 2024, hopefully we'll be able to see a lot of change in how we're doing our inspections and what that inspection process looks like. So stay tuned. At some point, you guys will be getting a list of resolutions or ordinance that we want to put in place to be able to kind of mimic or at least be as close to the city of West Lafayette as we can. Some of those builders are smart enough that if there's ordinance in place in the city, if we build it just outside the city, we can do a lot of things and try to save a whole bunch of money, but that typically equates to a lack in safety of that building. So with any luck, we'll be able to get something kind of moving forward to get some of that change. So a lot of things coming, and we'll keep you updated, and I'll get you this report sent out as soon as I get it squared away. Other than that, the only other thing I've got is we'll be working on one of the positions that we had talked about for this year is adding a part-time assistant to be able to take care of some of the back end bill paperwork, report stuff. There's just a lot of those things that are really bogging us down. But I haven't started working on that yet. I want to make sure I get these two firefighter positions filled first. I just would rather devote as much attention to those jobs as we can to get them filled first, and then we'll move on to that. Plus, I want to make sure we've got a good job description, which Angel's been working on a job description for an assistant in the office, and I want to be able to kind of take that and kind of peel off of it and kind of get something close. But we're working on that. We've got right now, run wise for this year, we're at run number 70, 78, 74. And last year we were at 48, 43. So we're up quite a bit. So, of course, the inclement weather plays a role in that. So we could be doing great and be 40 ahead. And we've talked about it before. We could be 50 ahead. And in a month and a half, when we meet again, we're 10 behind. So it just kind of bounces all over the place. But should you guys have any questions, you want to pop in, you want to hang out, you're welcome.
One question, one comment. The comment first is 2 years ago that structural, your administrative charter never been blank.
Yes.
I mean, we didn't, we survived thanks to you guys. And it's good to see that the fire department and leadership is moving forward, proudly moving forward to serve the community. And I think they all recognize that. My question is, when you're looking at the runs and so on and the volunteers, is there anything that you do to log in the hours of the full-time versus volunteers?
I mean, we know what our logged hours are for our paid staff. We know what their schedule is. We know what they're scheduled to work. For the volunteers, it's kind of a difficult thing to do. We try to log as much of it as we can, but it's hard to equate an hour for an hour. Just because their time availability is much different. We used to have a point system that we stuck to, which would show the amount of engagement that you've had doing all of the things and give you a percentage of what those are. Part of the reason we got rid of that process was it wasn't a fair depiction of their involvement. So you could be here for 4 hours hanging out, helping train, wash trucks and do things like that. But if we didn't catch a call, that time didn't exist. And I didn't like that because there was no way of logging that amount of time you were here, short of trying to give you an hour for an hour trade. And you know, and the difficulty was showing what value was, right? If you may not be here for 4 hours hanging out, but if you're at home and you're able to leave home and go take 3 or 4 calls, there's a lot of value in your ability to go take calls. So it just did not do a very good job of, I mean, it was quantifiable data, but it wasn't quantifiable data if you being here, you know, especially the way our shifts are structured now, we've got a very good idea of who those people are that are engaged, who are working, who are here training, who are taking calls. And to me,
Is there any need to have something like that?
I think there will be as we grow. I think we'll have to get back to that. We'll have to get back to a system that we're able to plug that data into. But, for years and years, we went back and forth because things like a PR detail, if we're going to Klondike School to do things, the number of points assigned to that thing versus taking a call, it was a really difficult thing to work out that was fair and equitable for everybody. So, but there will have to be a system in place that, I want to require everybody be engaged in PR details. I think that, we have a few folks that do all of them. But I think it's important for everybody to get out in the community and do things that isn't just responding to someone's home on their worst day, right? I think that it's super important and we have enough people here that see the value in doing it. It's just an availability thing and a time thing. So I think that's where the benefit comes in assigning them to a shift. Drew's got the ability right now to send a message out to all the people on his shift. Hey, tomorrow or our next day on, we're going to be doing an inspection here and we've got a PR detail here. We need 2 or 3 people that can come out. He can target a smaller audience of people. And then, he can send it out to everybody, but individually going to his shift, he's got that ability to hit those folks first. I think that'll help with some of it. But we will eventually have to progress back to something or go back to a system that's able to track all of it. But
Thank you.
we'll get there for sure. The only other 2 things I've got is we had talked about the concrete project to Station 2. We've got a contractor who believes that can all be done during the winter time. I know they pour concrete in the winter all the time, but he's got the ability to do it. And actually he came in about $20,000 cheaper than the other 2 quotes. And was able to build in a contingency for us. Without the contingency for the cold weather, it was about 30 grand cheaper than everybody else. So his goal was to try to get started within the next couple weeks. We're waiting for the weather to hit another, I don't want to say warm because it's not going to be warm, but not 0 degree temperatures. And he's going to be able to get to work. They're going to start rip out down there and they'll be able to pour and keep it heated and all that stuff. So they're going to be doing that in the next couple of weeks. Right now, the plan for upstairs is for the contractor to start next Monday, hopefully. And again, a lot of that's just getting pieces in place, through the processes we've been waiting. They picked up other jobs and they're finishing jobs up. And some of it's been, Pat is looking at other jobs through this process too. So it's not on Pat. It's just trying to line up and get all the stuff done. And the advantages now is David Hedden will be kind of taking care of a lot of that stuff here. David knows that construction stuff. He knows all that back end, and David's just going to be the one handling it and stay on top of the contractors and Pat, and which takes a ton off of me to try to be doing that. So, which is why we hired Pat to start with. So, but I think we've got the people in place to do the job. I think and you hit it on the head. That org chart was blank in a lot of places for a long time. And we're finally getting to a place where, for lack of a better way to say it, I feel like I'm not doing everything by myself. Administratively, that's how I felt for a long time, because it was more important that we get guys on the trucks to take calls, and I wanted to free them up to be able to go on those calls and not be buried under administrative stuff. And I think we're finally getting to a place that we've got that help. Joe coming off the truck is a big help. Sherry being able to be here, doing the MIH and the EMS side of things, and Drew helping with that stuff. It really frees up a lot of time to be able to dig into some of that extra stuff
To be cheap.
that's getting there.
Good for you.
It's a slow process, but we're getting there. On
Well,
that,
I think it shows anything, the morale, the amount of runs, the things you hear people say of how Wabash has really come of age.
not all the things that other departments say about us are great things, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay.
The career departments have a lot of good stuff to say.
Yeah, well, and you've heard it said before, those people that matter know we're doing the right business, and the people that don't matter are the ones slinging dirt, and those are the people that probably need to be doing a better job in what they're doing.
And it will matter to them when you have to respond to a call from them.
You bet. And some of that I think he's going to be talking about in his Shelby Township part. So I'll shut up with that right now.
Is there any,
One small question, is there any concern to folks leaving, since we just adjusted pay, was any of it? Like, I need to be making more money, I gotta go take this opportunity because they offered me more, is there any concern there that we should be aware of as we approach another year of deciding the salaries next year?
Neither of the people that left here had anything to do with money. And we can talk more once we've adjourned, but
Okay.
had nothing to do with money. In fact, the pay increase, I was careful to not talk a lot about it until we got towards the end of the year. I just didn't want to get to a place that we were making some promise and then this, oh shit, kind of happened. And I didn't want to get there. And the guys have all been incredibly appreciative and they all extend their thank you. So, but we'll talk more about the other two positions.
I can,
Thank you.
if you want, I can jump in with the AFR and I'll keep it brief first. I'm gonna project the piece here. I sent it to print because after gave you guys the annual financial report, I realized that the output from Gateway doesn't include the actual budget report. So I will put this here for you and put it on the screen so that you guys can view it. All right. So I'll make sure to be relatively quick about it. I don't want to get us super bogged down, but if you have questions, please interrupt me so that we're in the right place. Because this year, part of what we've done as we've grown our finances and accounting is also making sure that we've created those funds throughout the year. And so that's why this document's a little longer, because we've made sure to subdivide funds. We have grant funds that have come in, which reminds me that later in the year, we got approved for a third grant, which is tied to MIH, but would go into a separate fund. So we'll have to create that particular
Is
fund
this
as
a
well.
section that's not included in here?
Yes, but I'll get you a physical copy of it. So because Tom's Web generates the budget report, but for some reason the state's annual financial report doesn't actually look up budget categories. So when I printed it off, it didn't include that.
Yeah.
So the first piece is the rainy day fund. I think I indicated at the last meeting that our township assistants have been more than the need was more than last year we could budget for. We don't have the ability to, well, we can always say no regardless, but that's not, state requires us to approve people that are in need. So we had to dive deep into the township, into the rainy day funds to cover township assistance. So if you see there, just under 17,200 or so went to township assistance, and then there was 1,600 that went for a general fund overage. We were just a little bit over in the general fund. Last year, as I mentioned, our budget was less money than we realistically needed to be able to do stuff. A big chunk of that extra expense was the going in and doing the surveying for the different properties, which we're still waiting on 2 of those surveys to return, but we got 2 of them back. And
Those other two.
yeah, the other 2 haven't. I'm gonna reach out to them.
By the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay. So general fund, and this is the big one here. So it turned out I made a mistake in budgeting and health insurance. And I had only assigned the portion to Amy's salary for the township administrator salary that was coming out of the general fund. So we ended up being a little bit over on that on civilian perf. And so those are the 2 major differences when it comes to the overage on personnel expenditures. Also the $600, which I mentioned prior to the beginning of the meeting about we kept the intern a couple extra weeks to be able to, and that's why I'm asking for retroactive permission. Which you guys are under no obligation to say yes, but I figured I'd ask. And then on office supplies, we did spend more this year in office supplies than we budgeted. We paid less in stampage and postage, sorry, which is stamps essentially. And so we were a little bit over on that category. When you go here, and this is where you see the big difference, we were about 8,000 over, and a big chunk of it was that we were over in other professional services. And so that was an area that last year we budgeted better for. Sorry, next year we budgeted better for already.
Remind me what this was for.
Sorry?
Remind me what this was for.
So other professional services, and I can pull up, let me grab the I want to make sure that I give you accurate information here, so. Um. So, among other things, I know that it includes some of the expenses for payroll, which is relatively small portion of it. We also do on, let's go 2023 here, general fund, other professional services. So a big chunk of it was payroll. We also started using a couple of other softwares like Trello to be able to keep better track of goals and planning and whatnot. So we have net results. So it's our accounting software that accounts for about $3,000 of that. We've
Andy, are these things that the board discusses, or is these things that you have the authority to do on your own?
We
Just
will
say,
discuss it when he.
well, to
tells us
propose a
what-
new budget, yeah.
Yeah, what he's budgeting for.
Yeah.
Professional services,
Mhm.
which we did this year. I remember this was a whole conversation a few months
Mhm.
ago, right?
Yeah. So a big chunk of it was payroll. The largest single expense was the largest single expenses were net results. We pay about $3,200 for the software that we use for accounting and township assistance. And so if you look there, when we already have other professional services, that took out $3,200 out of it by itself. And so that's why next year we budgeted more appropriately really to what the expenses we have been seeing out of that line item is.
so we won't see these expenses of software and everything else.
There'll be, but I can, if,
We will, but we budgeted for them appropriately.
yes, exactly,
That's-
yeah.
And we had that whole conversation. I'm actually less concerned about that because I remember us having that whole
Yeah.
conversation.
Mhm.
Than with grounds maintenance. I don't remember us being over by almost a quarter of that budget.
So a piece of it was that we had a $13,000 removal of a tree.
Yeah.
So the 13,
Yeah.
the $13,000 removal of a tree actually puts us $5,000 over overall when you look at it. So when we did the budgeting last year for labor and supplies, we divvied it up in such a way that we thought between the two combined, we would spend $35,000. Between the two combined, we've spent $39,000. And what we had hoped actually was that the vendor would itemize the supply separately so that they would have to pay less in taxes, but they didn't itemize it and instead charge it as labor. So we just ran it out of labor instead of any supplies there.
So on the, if I may, on the cemetery thing, when I've gone down and looked at these and I think it would behoove us to look at what the cost in the future is going to be, because a number of those trees at the Sandridge are
Yeah.
need to be taken down. And is there a way that when you look at that and you talk to the gentleman that does that, can we anticipate estimates as what this is going to be? Because they're
Yeah. There's several of those, not tied to this specifically, but I'll mention it. I'm actually this year, one of the pieces that I'm trying to hone in more is what the expense will be for cemeteries long term.
right.
A part of it is also that we want to look at what it will cost to, we just went through, I don't know if you guys saw, we just went through and did we made sure that two of our cemeteries, which are within
Yes.
city limits,
Yes.
got historic preservation status with the city of West Lafayette. And part of it, not that they require of us, but that I would like us to make sure and do, is that we're doing a better job of trying to maintain the headstones at the cemeteries as well. That will require some funding. And so we're looking, and this is actually one of the pieces that Sean Lutz, who's one of the folks that leads the charge on historic preservation stuff in Lafayette, trying to figure out how we can get donation money in, how we can raise money and funding to be able to do some of that. But that also ties in, like you mentioned, all of our cemeteries, we have to do an inventory of trees at some point and see what the health is of all of those so that we can project better for future
So on the
budgets.
two that are on historic sites now, is there any funding that's available for that to help maintain it?
Not yet. We would be able to use that to apply for grants and other pieces since we do have that status. But from the city of West Lafayette itself, there isn't funding for that.
So it's just a nice designation.
Its designation, the more practical piece of it is that given that they are on the protected list,
then we wouldn't be able to just sell it to a developer and have them raise it.
Stays
As stays as a cemetery,
Good,
correct?
okay.
That's the biggest implication of it from the township perspective, but then the better implication of it brings recognition and hopefully also brings in donations so that we might be able to maintain some of that.
This area over here at the cemetery where there was the accident, we didn't have to pay out of pocket for any of that.
We did have to pay for this one out of pocket. We have actually, on that note, for this year, I just heard about it today. I don't know exactly when and over the weekend it was, but at Hebron Cemetery,
Yeah.
Which is the one closer to where you live.
Yes.
That one actually, there was a hit and run. Sorry, there was a hit and run accident, and so our fence got damaged. I still haven't been able to go and inspect it, but that's something that we'll be working from.
On 500 and.
There was a hit and run crash there at the intersection, Morehouse and 225, or 250, whatever it is. And there was damage done to it, but they, again, with being a hit and run, they don't have suspect vehicle information, they don't have any of that stuff, because they just found the crash had occurred and somebody just hit it and then drove away. That a repeated crash, so.
Cool.
Yeah. So I know that there will be some expense there. But that's part of what we have actually funding for in cemetery infrastructure.
I was gonna say, what do we bet, like, between cemetery infrastructure and the grounds maintenance, what do we budget for next year?
Let me pull it up for you.
It's 13 grand. That's a shitload of money, remove a tree, if we
I know.
do it 2 more times. In the near future.
When we went down, when that whole tree saga started, we went down and we're kind of looking through them and as Amy and I were talking about it, and I think on it might have been part of the conversation, just what do? Do you set it up to where you just plan to have 2 trees every year? You just keep that plan in place. And then if you don't have to drop 2 trees, that money can roll over. You've got that money budgeted for it. Because I mean, one big tree like that big one, that $13,000 tree can wipe you out. I mean, just like
Yeah,
that, you're
That's what I'm
going
concerned
anymore.
about, is that's just such a way more money than I would have thought it would be.
But the problem with that is, the problem with that
So-
waiting is, I was concerned about. A number of the people down there, stakeholders are concerned about the limbs falling and damaging the
Mhm.
tombstones. Now you've got an even bigger problem.
Yeah, so what we budgeted between grounds maintenance and cemetery infrastructure. So last year you can see that we budgeted 35 plus 18.5, so that would be just about 53,500. This year we budgeted 70,000 between those 3 categories. So
Okay.
so we do have a little bit, yeah. So we have a little bit more leeway between those 3 categories, which are grounds maintenance, labor and supplies, and then cemetery infrastructure. So those 3 pieces together come up to 70 in the next budget. Hopefully, we don't spend 70 on it, right? But that we have a little bit more wiggle room and flexibility. And that's actually one of the advantages for next year's budget. I feel like I think I've said it before, with this budget, it was an improvement, but we were still really constrained because we were very limited on income. But being able to have an increase local income tax share as a result of the fire department's increase in funding is really going to be able to give us a flexibility to budget without any incident really being super likely to create a shortfall in the budget. I think that going from this year forward, we have the ability to breathe in the budget and be able to set numbers that we hopefully don't meet. So it's a lot less likely that we'll be hitting the total budget amount year over year going
Yeah,
forward.
didn't we go into 23 knowing we were gonna hit rainy day?
We
Kinda
expected
hard.
it, yeah. I expected it, yeah.
Okay, so what's the total overage here?
So the
Yeah.
total overage, we actually kept it under for the total, but the total overage really comes out to the money that the 1,600, excuse me, that we spent in rainy day fund. So we were really only over by 1,600 overall.
That's not bad.
Yeah. So when you look at here at the total budget for the fund, we ended up with 1,159, and so actually, so it would be actually just under $600 in overage actually for the fund itself. So we were a little bit, we ended up here with 1,159 left over in balance, and then we had a purchase that was larger that we instead used out of rainy day fund, and so we ended up at about $600 over for the general fund planned expenditures. you can see some of those here. So cemetery infrastructure, we did fix the fence here. So that's the cost for the fence replacement was $6,721.
And was all that covered by insurance or?
No, we haven't yet, but we are planning to file a claim to be able to recoup that money, but we haven't gotten it yet. So
And part of the delay in that is we couldn't get the information. The crash report didn't have some of the information in it, trying to track down who took the report, because West Lafayette, I was actually here with Tees that night on that call. West Lafayette, the sheriff's department and state police were here, so trying to track the report down and figure out who had it and who had the information to get the report, but some of it was redacted and didn't have, I mean, it was a mess trying to get the information that was needed.
Yeah.
So that was a big slowdown.
here's the general fund encumbrances. This one's actually a little bit different. For the general, for encumbrances, you don't put a budget amount on the accounting software because it's money that's really budgeted from last year. But this is the amount that at the beginning of the year, we did 2 encumbrances, one for the general fund, one for the firefighting fund. And so we encumbered this exact amount and this exact amount went out for that. Those were just the pay that we did for the last really for the board's salaries in 2022, since we had to run a retro payroll for the tax collection for the tax payment. So it was encumbered to be able to do that. Excess levy is a fund that we haven't really used. We have a balance of just under 4,000. It stayed the same. Township donations. This is a fund that we just created. We haven't expended money out of it, but we did have an income. And so these things don't always correctly reflect stuff because this is an old thing that doesn't get updated very well. We've received $133 in donations so far for the, oh, this is for the township assistance. Sorry. That's for, we haven't received donations for that one. We've received donations, 133 for the fire donations. And so we haven't had donations yet on the township piece, but we've had that set up. Community services and education. The overall fund doesn't actually get used. There are sub-fund accounts, and this is where it makes more matters. So we don't have a budget amount for this one, and this is why we don't have budgets for, because the way we set it up, it allows us to use the money as it comes in for payment. But if you were to look on your first page of the annual financial report, you're going to be able to see the cash balance for that fund in particular, for the 0602, the Community Services and Education Fund. And so between our 2 sub-funds, which is CPR classes, and the EMT classes, we have brought in $2,167 and we have dispersed $1,519. So we have a positive balance on that fund at the end of the year.
Chief, on that op one you guys did, which was, I thought was outstanding, that's not community service, is that under training or what?
Right now, we didn't expend any money for it. We supplied resources. So we had extra equipment, extra gear. We bought some extra Nomex hoods that we could use over there, but still having our stockpile here of stuff. So we didn't expend any money for that.
Excellent.
The same thing applies for township assistance. This is a general fund, like the general account, but then there's 2 sub accounts. The TA administration, which we don't currently use, we pay staff out of the general fund. I mean, they have a shared levy, so there's really no point in parsing where it comes out of. Except that right now, if we were to try to put it out of township assistance, it would decrease our amount of assistance coming out of the TA fund because you can't put lit shares in the TA fund. So it makes a lot more financial sense to pay staff out of the general fund. Then the township assistance, the direct assistance fund. Like I mentioned, we actually spent more than the budgeted amount. So in the township assistance fund, we budgeted 55, spent 55. The overage of 17,000 came from the rainy day fund. And we actually this year had a wider discrepancy than I had anticipated between housing and utilities. So we ended up paying 50,000 in housing, but only 4,300 in utilities. We actually didn't have a single prescription application even. Last year we had about 5, so it just ebbs and flows, right? Funerals and burials, we didn't have any last year, but we've already had one this year. And then for the fire department fund, this is more standard, and I'll start going through here through some of the stuff that we've already talked about or done. There's a couple of pieces that we didn't budget for last year, but implemented knowing that we would have money available throughout the year. One of them was the specialization pay, which is in the 2023 budget is fully funded. The specialization pay was for paramedics and for and for the for paramedic and for this year it was for paramedic and IT stipend. So it was the IT stipends and the paramedic stipend. Then we have part-time staff. So you can see here, we actually didn't use a ton of part-time staff last year. We only spent 8,292 on firefighters. As you know, as we were stepping through and hiring people, we didn't have people throughout the whole year. So we were able to, all in all, based off of what we budgeted for, we ended up spending 192,000 less. This year should be a lot closer to what we budget is what we spend, but even then it won't match, right? Like we currently have 2 vacancies, right? So we will expend a little bit less in salaries than we had budgeted and whatnot. Of relevance here, the other one that was also important was overtime pay. We hadn't budgeted it, but then earlier in the year, if you guys will remember, we went through and did so that we met the Fair Labor Standards Act, and we set up how overtime gets paid over a 28-day cycle. So that's where that is going to come out of. And then for 2024, it's budgeted. So
So I know I'm gonna be asked when somebody looks at this. So you have roughly, well, you have 79% in that figure right there. Is somebody gonna ask me, does that roll over to next year?
The money rolls over to in the account to be able to be appropriated in the future. Yes.
Yeah, which I think is captured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it stays in the fire fund. Yeah. It stays in the fire fund.
There's a
So
lot of numbers, a lot of statistics.
oh yeah.
and
Oh no, yeah. It's hard to be able to get everything there.
And truthfully, the goal is for you guys to understand it. If we can talk to you guys and get you to understand it, then through that process, it kind of helps.
That's why my question sometimes.
Oh, it's perfect.
No, yeah.
I go with that.
And for here, medical supplies, we had a little bit less expenses this year than we had budgeted. Operating supplies was a little bit less than we had budgeted. Other supplies was less. But then in our third category, and I know that we already went through this in the budget season, we were anticipating that we would be significantly over. We hadn't taken into it, we hadn't like fully, our last year's budget, we noticed that there were things that we needed to budget more for in future years. And so this is the one that had significant overages in professional services and in insurance policies. Those were amended so that they're closer to what we anticipate actual expenses to be in 2024 in the budget. But we ended up in that category 35 over. All in all, we ended up 166,000 under budget for last year.
And some of that was us trying to figure out, you guys probably remember us talking about it. Part of it was us trying to figure out if things were coming out of the appropriate funds.
Mhm.
So as we start shuffling some stuff around, like the professional services has grown, right? And those were all things that we want to make sure that we're trying to get them as close as possible. And again, 22, we worked off Jennifer's budget. 23, we did the best we could to try to get an idea of where we were going to be. And I think that 24's budget probably gives a much better depiction
Of what the
of what
expenses
it should be. This was us trying to work our way through the year and try to shuffle stuff around the best we could to hit it right. So
Yeah, and you can see that actually also in the repairs and maintenance. Between the two of those, we were 11,000 over. But our next year's budget is going to be, just as a reminder. So last year's budget, we had 50,000 between both of the repairs and maintenance. Next year, it's 60,000, and so we were about 11 over. We gave ourselves room to work back to as well, but making sure that we were closer to reality there. And in professional services, where we were significantly over, We budgeted 35 from 12.5 for next year. So we've been working through some of those pieces to make it a little bit more accurate as we budget forward, to make sure, because a lot of those expenses, like we discussed last time, right? A lot of it is when we hire new folks, there's big expenses. There's a lot of pieces that, are just name of the game, if you
Well, in
will.
our training budget, part of that is us sending one guy to paramedic school. That was $8,500 for his
Yeah.
class. So any other training we had outside of that was going to put us damn close to what we were doing. So we had several folks go to other classes. But, that's just one of those things. It's hard to gauge. We didn't anticipate a paramedic program when we built that budget of 10 grand.
Yeah.
So we didn't anticipate it.
And even now, as we had training last year at 10, this year we put it at 15. And we'll evaluate. I think this is the first full year when we'll really be doing training budget, and actually having this is the first full year we'll be doing training in a more regular sense for staff. Exactly.
I was incredibly impressed that we ended the year with $166,000. I expected it to be a lot tighter than that at the end of the year,
Mhm.
so.
And so then we have the encumbrances. This was the money that we, again, same as we did with the general fund, we had to go through here and do some perf expenses. We have the fire department donations. This is the one where we had, all in all, on the unrestricted category, we had 133.50 in donations. But we haven't expended anything out of it. Fire equipment debt, this is one of those funds I've mentioned always is on autopilot. So we just get the money that the state determines we need to pay off our obligation on 602. We disperse the amount with a 64-cent overage. Cume Fire, and this is the one where later in the night there will be I have a resolution in front of you. And so that's the 174,000. Ed mentioned the two projects that we're currently working on. It's the upstairs, the living space and the kitchen and the living space, as well as the pad of Station 2. And between the two of those, we anticipate running about $190,000 or so. So we're essentially appropriating the full amount to cover most of that expense, or encumbering that amount to be able to.
Technically, we'll do the spending this year, but it's technically gonna be that we spent it last year.
Yes.
2023.
Yes.
All of our contracts were signed in 23, so.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Private grants, we have the private grant for Glick. We received $3,000, and we spent out 1,533. So what we spent was the assistance, the rental assistance, utility assistance. We spent money on the bus passes, the bus tokens, and then we have money remaining on medical transit, which we have the funding, but we haven't set up a structure yet for it. So we have $1,500 that for MIH we can still continue to use as we build that structure. And then when we got the grant, we put $50 towards paratransit, and we paid $20, which is about 10 trips in paratransit. Not that we've used all 10 trips, but we bought 10 at a time so that we could hand them out if we needed to for the program, for the MIH program. The health issues and challenges grant, last year we budgeted $108,000. We spent $76,000, so we have 31,000 of last year's money that is still remaining. What'll end up happening is throughout the next few years, we'll move the money around. The most important part for this grant is that over the course of 3 years, we're going to spend $315,000. So that gets fudged a little bit. So at some point in the year, you might get an additional request for funding for this year to increase the budget line or whatnot. It really, frankly, at least from my perspective, is something more that the board needs to be aware of rather than approve. But out of a general sense of being more cautious, I will bring it to you guys for approval. The second grant that we got was $10,000 for the newborn safety device. That's for the Safe Haven baby box. We spent, as we mentioned, it ended up costing maybe 13 or 14. So we paid 10,000 out of there and then 4,000 out of the Cume Fire Fund. So that's money in, money out, except, and you'll see in the cash in that first page of the financial report, for those two funds, they're reimbursement models. So we pay the vendor and then we submit for reimbursement, but there's a lag in between us submitting for reimbursements and receiving money. So actually the state has only reimbursed the second month for the MIH program. We're working on, we've submitted the other months, it's just that they haven't paid us yet. So between those two funds are technically in the negative, but it's a reimbursement month. Exactly, it's coming. Other than that, that's it for the actual money spent. But then I will go through and show you the annual financial report itself. Pull it up to this side. All right. So here's that same document. This paper is the one you guys have in front of you. So here's the cash balance at the beginning of the year, the receipt, the disbursements. We began the year for all of the funds that the township has with 1.43 million, and we ended the year with 1.49 million, roughly. So we received a little bit more than we dispersed. Some of the relevant numbers I think that aren't fully captured in the budget itself would be, for example, the Cume Fire. We started with $800,000. We received 503,000 in part because we also sold 606. And we've dispersed 350 plus we're going to do an encumbrance of 175. So when you put it all together, we ended up just like with those planned expenses, really, we ended up about $20,000 less than we had, but the fund is in a healthy position right now. So it's about $780,000 after those two expenses come out. And for this year, we're trying to be a little bit more gentle to the Cume Fire Fund now that we're getting done with a lot of our bigger projects that we really needed to get done quicker to be able to bring the buildings to the level that we needed to be able to operate them successfully. Payroll deductions, I do want to make a note here. That one's a little bit, that's a holding account. So that's essentially money that we take from payroll and then put back and then pay out to either our FSA, which gets paid at the end of the year. That's a big chunk of what the money is left over there because our plan runs July through June. So we have money that's sitting there that when the end of the year comes out, they'll ask us to pay for that money. So a big chunk of that is that. We had a couple of accounts that from the Tyson era had balances that they shouldn't have had there. It was just, we had withholding, but we didn't pay out of that account. This year, part of what we did was clear out those accounts by paying from those accounts for some of the expenses that we had on FICA taxes. And so that brought us back to even so that at the end of the year, we are as close to zero as possible to those accounts. And in a running total, it hits zero on a frequent basis. It's just that, it might hit zero, but at any particular moment, it might be a little bit over and then it hits zero again. So we cleared those out. These are the receipts. This is really just money that comes in from general property taxes, and then the special distributions like FIT, which is a tiny one, financial institution, vehicle excise tax, commercial vehicle excise tax, local income tax shares, and then the supplemental distribution of local income taxes. So then you can see rainy day doesn't get anything. General fund gets all of the certified shares, which next year will be just under $305,000 in local income tax certified shares. Of note here, these receipts that you see, other receipts, are canceling out checks that are 3 years or older. So there's a process that we have to, for our accounting purposes, we're required to keep them on the books until 3 years after they were issued. And so at the end of the year, we were able to clear some of those checks. And that brings money into the accounting piece of it. So those receipts are money that was said to be spent but hadn't cleared the bank account, and then at the end of that process gets voided essentially. This is money that came in for the community services fund and education. We've had minor reimbursements in some of the funds. So what do you see here? Reimbursements. This is just the receipt portion, which I imagine is of less interest to you guys. On the receipts here, you can see the sale of capital assets. That was the selling of 606. And here's the grant that we got, the $3,000. And these are the beginning of reimbursements for the health issues and challenges grant and payroll deduction. Okay, so
And Hill, if I may, I'm looking at that, you've got 40 pages there.
there's a lot of
A
it.
lot of this is just receipts. with
Yeah,
I understand
Yeah.
that, but I'm just thinking if there is a succinct way of doing this.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into the detail vendor by vendor, so that's
Thank
just to get you. So general fund, this is what you just viewed. It's just it's broken out in a different system, which is what the state does for financial reports. So there's professional services, printing and advertisement, insurances, utility services, repairs and maintenance, and other services and charges. And then, so this is the expenses for the general fund. And then you also have, and then you have the same thing for each of the different funds. So for housing, we spent 50,000. For utilities, we spent 4,320. Fire and EMS, you're able to see the totals for all the different categories that we just discussed. And so all of this is what we just went through in more detail in the budget report, is this is just categorized based on the global pieces of what those budget report are. And then here you can see the expenses. So in the categories, and you can see this here, in the rainy day fund, this was the payment of 1612 from that was essentially general fund money. And then you have the list of other expenses that were township assistance expenses. That's, I think, the most unique of anything from this annual financial report, is just that there's money for township assistance coming out of rainy day fund. It doesn't like my name. Whatever. And then in personnel services, you can see actually what's very useful, at least to me when I was doing it from the board. I want to make sure that on general fund, there isn't something that doesn't make sense coming out of personnel services, for example. So this is IMPERS, which is our retirement system. We have the board members, we have the staff, we have Department of Revenue, which is some of the vendors that we sometimes have to pay money for, and then Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield for our insurance. And then we pay the withholdings for taxes get paid to the payroll service that then pays them forward to the IRS and the Department of Revenue for the state. In supplies, we bought from Amazon and from these are different supplies for the township office. When you look at services and charges, we have here the breakdown really of what we were talking about. We have a lot of these expenses that end up being for a software that we need to be able to use in the office. Yeah. Yeah.
Only went so over on professional services.
Exactly. Yeah. And you can see there all of those pieces. So 11 and 12. Yeah. And then for capital outlays, which most of our expenses really came for the repair of the fence on our cemetery. And then it's the same process for all of these other funds. So township assistance, we just have a lot of vendors that are LLCs that, you know, manage housing or rent or utilities and whatnot. So we have all of those expenses written out.
That's okay.
And then for the fire fund, it's the same thing. If you look through, make sure that in personnel services, everything is either an employee or stuff that we pay for employee benefits. And then in supplies, we have the same thing. So we have,
Yeah, that's fine. I don't care how much you
yeah.
spend on us.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
if there's something
We'll be here a
interesting
while.
in this last little bit, like, let me
No.
know. But
I
like
can-
I circled the thing that I think we found remotely interesting, and I think that's kind of.
Yeah.
Unless you have other things you want to dive into.
No. And then I'm trying to bring through here. This is the deficit funds, which are the ones I mentioned earlier, the reimbursement funds.
Okay.
And we have to submit what our insurance plans are. So we have the details of our insurance plan in there. This is a transfer from the rainy day fund, from the general fund to the rainy day fund from last year's leftover money. This is the federal grant. We have to submit the documentation for the federal grant that we received. And so this is pass-through money. So it's all reported there. And then we have this piece is actually of noteworthy. We haven't finished doing the asset. We have to do it every 2 years. We're still building and compiling all of the asset lists, so it hasn't been updated, but it will be by next year. We have a format and everything, and I'm working on finishing that up, but it won't be ready for this year to be able
Include
to.
Renovation and everything else.
Yes,
Yeah,
it'll
hard part is to figure out how granular to go with it. That's-
Yes.
That's been some of the slowdown. in the
Yeah,
process.
exactly. And so that part is a work in progress, and then this is just a statistical report for township assistance, which essentially covers how many requests we have. And I think that this is noteworthy. So last year we had 173 requests for assistance. The number of assistance recipients, because there's households that have multiple people, 207 people received. We, of the 173, even though we went through and did requests, sometimes it was multiple times that a family came through, so it was 78 individual households received township assistance. And then this was a total value estimated of what we provided in township assistance. And so then you can see that going through.
So
Yeah.
crazy to me that for years that was $30,000 and they thought it was too much. We kept having to pull it away.
And what was it one time that they spent $250?
Yeah.
Something like that?
That was Jennifer's last year.
Yeah, last year we spent
$250.
$250 in assistance. And then this is just it indicates what we have pensions in. So that's the annual financial report. It's a long report, and I apologize. It's just long.
Well, I'm impressed with the fact you said you had not much to talk about and.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't talk about anything other than the financial report, so
Well. So my question is, this will be on the site,
yes.
website, if it ever gets up, according
Yeah.
to.
Mhm. To
people
the vendor,
doing
yeah.
this. In the minutes, how would you prefer I list this? Because there's too much to detail. You want me to just refer to that?
Report.
I would say see a report, and I would just highlight, from my perspective, I think it's fair to highlight the areas where you
Yes.
guys had interest, like those services and charges pieces in the general fund.
I'm thinking, what's a person gonna wanna see?
Exactly. I
They're
think
not
that's
gonna
what's
drill-
relevant.
They're not gonna drill down.
Yeah.
to
But
it.
the hard part is you don't know what anybody wants to see. They may all want to see different things.
Yeah.
So being
But-
able to
I
put-
would note that almost every overage that we had this year has been appropriately adjusted in the budget for next year already.
Yeah.
And it's, in
I would-
most cases, it's been anticipated.
Yeah,
and this will be on Gateway, right? So we can
Yes.
also link to it.
it won't be in Gateway
Yeah,
just
it's
yet
not.
because it has to get submitted after you guys do an approval process, but it will be in Gateway in
So
the next few
man,
days.
just tell me how you want me to.
Yeah.
Link that and everything
Yeah.
else and all.
And I can you can draft it, and I can get you a link here in the next few days. For the financial.
Do you have any other questions? I have a way I want to deal with this.
No, I don't.
For expediency, because we just touched all this, I'm gonna put 2 over here for just a second. And let's just rip through the other 3 because they are all we just 100% talked about all, right?
Good.
All right. Resolution 2024-01, amending the 2023 salary resolution to increase the spending on an intern by $600. I will call for a vote on resolution 2024-1.
All those in favor of accepting resolution number 2024-01, resolution to amend the 2023 salary resolution, all those in favor say, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Resolution passed. Thank you.
Resolution 2024-3. This is a resolution to encumber the remainder of the Cume Fire 1190 fund for roughly $175,000. So that will count against this budget, 2023 budgetary year rather than 24. I will call to vote on resolution 2024-3.
Resolution number 2024-03, resolution to encumber 2023 appropriations. All those in favor of this resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Resolution 2024-4, approving the Wabash Township 2023 annual financial report, which we just went through in detail. I will call for a vote on resolution 2024-4.
All those in favor of accepting resolution 2024 as presented signify by saying aye. Aye.
All right, that was the stuff that we just went through. So now we'll go
Correct.
back to resolution 2024-2, which is the interlocal cooperation agreement between Wabash
Yes.
Township and the community fire territory of Otterbein. Is there anything that you want to say about? Are there any questions that you have about this? Since you didn't get enough of a look at it beforehand, I'm good with what I have seen. Is there anything else that you want to say about this before we call for a vote?
I would just highlight, I'll keep it short. I'll highlight a couple of pieces. What this is, and I know I've mentioned it before, is we were able to go through and look at what the city of Lafayette does with Perry Township, which is Dayton, the Dayton area, the township that covers Dayton. And then we replicated that into a contract so that we actually have the format that the state really requires us to do, but also so that we have a formal agreement that has lines and specific areas that we're covering. And that, which is the most important piece, is here. So, and I'll go through it quickly. Really, what as we indicated last time, we told Shelby Township that we would be willing to cover a greater area than they agreed to. Obviously, that's not our decision to make. That's up to their provider unit to decide that. So there's actually a small reduction in the area that we provide. Well, this is a significant reduction in the area that we provide fire protection for. So we have here 75 North is an area that we had covered in the past. We're not currently going to be covering that. We have the Arrowhead and Bent Tree subdivision. That's where Susan Rowe lives. We won't be covering that anymore. We have a couple subdivisions here that we're not going to be covering. This we won't be covering. And then we have El Vernon on the south end that we're not going to be covering. Now, it wasn't the decision that I would have made, but they are providing us the same amount of money as we requested for the larger portion and just telling us to cover less territory. So we're going to be covering, yeah.
If I may, it's important that you guys understand for sure, because it's going to end up coming to a head of what's dropping. Most important parts are the areas that we're losing are very high-end homes. El Vernon, Gray Goose.
Yep.
This subdivision here, 75 North, so Pinch Meadows, where we had the big fire, which is right back here. We're losing, all of those homes are well over $750,000 or so. This subdivision, all of the area we're losing, the value of those homes are incredibly high.
Yep.
So it's not that we're cutting stuff out, and I want to make sure that we made it clear that they were given options.
Oh, yeah.
This wasn't a decision we made, and that's the way it's going to be spilled, is we made this decision. But they were given options, and I've already fielded phone calls from people that live on El Vernon, and the gentleman that lives out here in Finch Meadows, where we went to his house fire last year. After, hey, I heard this is going to be changing. I told him I couldn't really get into a whole lot of it, because at that point we hadn't received the contract back from Jerry, and we hadn't talked about it here. So
I,
And we can state it in the minutes that they were offered 3 different options, 2 of which were significantly larger than this, and we would have done it for the same cost, and this is what they had chosen. So we can document that publicly, that's fine.
yeah, and we actually did more than 2 extra large. We had like 5 different maps that would have covered more area. What we wanted to make sure that we did in this map was that we were road bound,
Yep.
so that we had a map that, you know, it's based off of a road. On the one side of the road, its coverage is one department, the other side of the road is us, and it allows it to be well done by dispatch, and it
Basic
makes it a little bit easier.
professionalism.
Basic professionalism. Again, in the future, as is still the case, if they wanted to contract for a larger portion, or for our township, at least speaking for the executive and for the fire department, our biggest priority isn't how much money we receive for these services. The biggest priority for us is the public safety.
Yeah.
So if at some point in the future they wanted to amend that service area, we would be amenable to it without really asking for a ton more money, because that's not what it's about. Our budget, this is a drop in the bucket for our budget. So
I
we're
would be
comfortable.
amenable to that as well, to expanding this in the future, as long as it is road bound.
Yeah. And then this is,
Not nicely like this.
and this is a exhibit that designates what areas we will be covering. It's the same thing as before, but in written format. And then we designated areas that are not included that we were previously covering. So all of these areas are areas that we were previously covering, and it's the ones that we will not be covering under this contract.
Ridiculous.
That's okay. We got it documented.
Yep.
We've had options. Everything has been publicly noted. There will be no confusion on this. Well, there will be, but there won't be.
I get what you're saying. Not on their part.
So anyway, that's the contract. What it does, and actually really more than anything, and I've been very, although it's not the map that we would have wanted, this actually helps clear out a lot of the pieces that have been issues throughout the years because the contract has been vague.
Yeah.
So we wanted to make sure that we're exactly,
Doesn't
and
matter who it's with, you
Yeah.
write it down black and white.
exactly. And so we've set up everything in such a structure that my hope is that in the future, this is a contract that if a service area gets modified, that's all good and we're able to modify it there. But the language and the structure makes it clear and also indemnifies us if, for example, there were to be a fire over there. And there was another department that had to respond. We're not responsible for their stuff because we're responding for the time that we're in that service area. And that's really what Lafayette wanted out of their language. And so that's why it's important to replicate it
Something
too.
I think super important to note with this contract is it requires it be sent to the recorder's office. So there can be no, oh, I just made the change and didn't tell anybody. If whatever is on record with the recorder's office
Yep.
is that record. And I think that prohibits some of the stuff that has taken place in the past years with changing
Yeah.
things like that, that's never been done the right way. So
So just a question contractually here. I see that we're going to sign this. Is there any signature approval from Shelby that I
Yeah.
see that's going to be made to them, mailed to them, but is there anything in here that requires them to sign this?
Yes, and they already did. So
They
they dropped off a signed copy of their contract today.
which is what you guys will end up signing
Yeah.
is the signed copy that's already got their signature on it.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying. I was like, I knew. Yeah, oh, okay, thank you.
And so we have that signed, and so as soon as we get that, if it is approved by you guys, we'll sign it, and then tomorrow I'll submit it to the recorder's office and to the SBOA, which is the requirement for interlocal agreements.
Awesome.
Good job.
Yes, glad to finally have this. This is why you write contracts. It is not even to protect yourself legally necessarily. It is so that both parties have a clear understanding. of
Exactly.
what the other person means, so that you don't end up with
Yeah.
personality issues down the line because there was a misunderstanding. Okay, on that note, Dave, do you have any other questions?
No, I do not.
All right, I will call for a vote on resolution 2024-2.
Resolution number 2024-02, resolution approving an interlocal cooperation agreement between Wabash Township and the Audubon Community Fire Territory for emergency and fire protection services. All those in favor of resolution 2024-2 as written and discussed, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Awesome. Is there anybody on the Zoom?
Nope.
Okay. I realized about halfway through all that we skipped public comment, but
There wasn't anybody. I was paying attention.
okay, good. All right. Any announcements before we adjourn? Our next meeting is
On the 20th, February 20th. We don't have, I don't have, there is a date, and I apologize. I just remembered that. Forgive me. I'll pull it up quickly.
Were you looking at that? We talked about types of town hall meetings that we've always gotten really good response from. Ed, do you think if we have a town hall meeting, do you think this Shelby Township thing, anybody's ever gonna read this? It's gonna post questions that aren't being covered?
I believe that this Shelby Township thing is going to come to a boil type of the head. It's going to, there will be more stuff coming from it. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's bad that we prepare for that. And I think that we maybe prepare for it in a way that once it does blow up and come to a head, we are willing to open our doors up and have a town hall style meeting.
Yeah.
To at least discuss our perspective on that. And I think that it would be okay for us to invite Shelby Township to say, hey, we're gonna be talking about this. Do you want to be present for this conversation? Because I don't want it to be one of those things where we pit one another against each other. But having said that, the questions that I've received, it won't take long before the media gets a hold of this. And it's
With
going
the
to
cost of those homes out there and they're concerned about not being covered, I can see the Shelby Township Board and Trustee being asked questions about this.
I hope they're asked questions.
I do too.
I hope the problem is that, we can do that off the
Yeah.
record, but
yeah, so if we have like a specific thing we want to talk about, right? Like that's what I'm waiting for like a joint meeting. It's like a real, I want to have an agenda, right? Like I don't want to just like sit everybody in a room and just be like, hey.
So let's storm
Because I
some,
feel like that's
Yeah.
gonna go
not here,
off
but
the
let's
rails.
throw some things together in the next 2 or 3 weeks of things that you think would be important from not just the fire department trustees position, but I have to think of the unincorporated areas of people that don't watch this all the time, that they're gonna talk at the grocery store and they're gonna ask a question, where do they go for that? So they don't go to the website because it doesn't work. So why don't we think, you guys, think of what are the critical things we need that a resident would ask that we'd have to ask in the future?
And we already have some of those pieces that we know we're looking for. Like, for example, one of those big questions that will come up quickly is how much how much area is the assessed valuation of the area that we're no longer covering? What's the assessed valuation of the area we're covering? Because that plays a big role that should play a big role into deciding how much you pay another municipality. It also plays a big role into what is currently being covered by Otterburn and what isn't,
And
right?
isn't there an insurance question?
Yes.
somewhere in there?
there sure is.
There will be a big piece, and I mean it's just reality. For us, our insurance rating is in the ISO is a 5, if I remember correctly, which is what we've been for many years. And so whereas theirs is an 8 or a 9, so that's gonna negatively impact their insurance rates significantly, as well as that change gets propagated through the ISO system. So I mean, but
Here's the concern I have. The concern I have is this isn't going to be noted. People aren't going to realize what's happened until something catastrophic happens at their home, and we are not the department that shows up. Then it's going to be, the initial knee-jerk reaction is going to be that we just didn't come. Not that they've been told about it and they have the ability to ask the questions that they
Or
want.
they show up and can't handle it and say,
Without-
where was wrong?
And I think that's a small enough. It's a small enough community, a small enough group of people that if you know a couple of people, I think you can scare up like you could get the word out about a Q&A without too much difficulty.
Yeah.
The traditional word of mouth.
and we'll be continuing to work on that. I will note just on the announcement side, next in a couple of weeks, Thursday, January 25th, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. there will be an open house at the William Henry Harris at the Harrison High School to give a little bit more insight as well as to the area plan study that we're doing in this area. And so the last time that we were here, they were just the staff was there and they were talking with the folks individually. At this open house at the beginning of each hour, there will be about a 10-minute presentation about what the plan entails and what it is and what it does. And so that would be something that just of note.
It'd be nice for us to be visible.
Yeah, and I plan on being there for that one. In addition to that, like I mentioned, we had the cemeteries that got protection this year. I think that's the only part that I have reports from our side of the building. So anything on your side, Ed? Right. You can close the meeting.
Okay, it is 8:42 PM. I move to adjourn this meeting of the Wabash Township Board.
All those in favor, by signify by saying aye.
Aye.
8:42.
Alrighty, thank you.
I'll get the minutes to you.
And I'll get you that link when I
Thank you.
update it.
I just got a note that the boys can flush the toilets.